Join us tonight. I am Pastor Dave. I'm a chaplain with COLA Street Chaplains and also a member of the Poor People's Campaign, the Los Angeles Faith Working Group, right here in LA. I want to thank Pastor Gail with Verdugo Community Church for letting us hold this event here. Thank you, Pastor Gail. We in the Poor People's Campaign are on our way to a huge march on Washington, D.C. on June 18th. We are creating the largest assembly of poor and low-wage earning people ever to march on the Mall to demand an end to poverty, militarism, ecological devastation, the war economy, and systemic racism. Thank you. That's our next big event. Please get there to Washington, D.C. And if you can't get there, help someone get there. Or please just spread the word about the event so that people can know what's going on. We want to raise awareness for the Poor People's Campaign in this community. So if you haven't met them yet, also get on the internet and meet the faith leaders of the group, Bishop William J. Barber II and Reverend Liz Theoharis. They're pointing us all to a better future. So tonight we present Gabrielino Tanva, Elder Tina Calderon, as she offers the American spirit and American spiritual viewpoint of earth, land, and water. Now Tina Calderon, who's right here, she'll come up here in a second, has ancestry from the Tanva, Chumash, Gabrielino Tanva, the Chumash tribe, and the Yoemo tribe. So when I was a kid, in the Midwest, in Iowa, in the 70s and 80s, as part of the dominant culture of white people, they taught us about slavery in our schools, but not about how brutal it was. And they taught us about the Trail of Tears, but they didn't say anything about the so-called school system for indigenous people that robbed kids of their culture while it imposed ours on them. I had to come to the Poor People's Campaign at this late age to learn that. I don't think school kids in some of our states are going to be learning the truth about these things today. And that's sad because we are all responsible. All of us, but also white people like me, especially white male faith leaders like me. We all talk about these injustices, but too few do anything meaningful about them. Why don't we properly express our love for our Native American people, our black people, our people of Asian descent? Why can't we? These amazing people are as much a part of the fabric of this country as any of us. For the sake of love, teach your kids to love others. Just a couple more thoughts before I bring Tina up here. This Christian nationalism we're talking about is no faith, people. Fighting a culture war, ignoring the true spirit of the people, is a way to do nothing and keep others confused and quiet. It is why my generation were always told to not talk at the dinner table about religion and politics. Our leaders were busy turning our beautiful faiths into twisted things and hoarding the money and political power for selfish greed. It was a trick that robs us of our souls, not talking to each other at the dinner table, of all places. So, folks, show up at this march I mentioned. We'll say a little more later. Look online about it. Teach your kids about it. Teach your kids about Martin Luther King's original Poor People's Campaign march, which this is a part of. Teach them today. So we're going to counter that story I just mentioned of faith in America tonight, with a story of true faith. Tonight we're going to tackle ecology, of the injustices that is ecological devastation. And we're going to tackle it from a Native American spiritual viewpoint. We are presenting this series on sacred text studies to show how all our faiths speak out against these injustices. Tina Calderon is a culture bearer of Gabrielino, Tanva, Chumash, and Yoeme descent. She is a wife, mother, grandmother, sister, and auntie to many. Additionally, Tina is a traditional dancer and storyteller who strongly believes in honoring her ancestors by sharing their history, educating others about indigenous truths, and inspiring others to respect the land, waters, sacred elements, and environment. So, enough of me to teach us of the beautiful people who lived and loved on this land before us. Please welcome Tina Calderon.
Hello, relatives. Netwanene, Tinor Duno Calderon, Gomitra Betna Home, Koi Mixkanagan, Koyoeme. I wish Koneha and for our manen and for the government. And what I'm saying to you is, I am Tino Ordino Calderon. I am Gabrielino Tomba, Ventureno Chumash, and Yoemen, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. I was invited to share a little bit about our cultural history and just whatever I wanted to share. And I really appreciate that because we've been invisible on our own lands for far too long. So much appreciation for this invitation, and happy to see all of you. I'm going to start though by offering a little land acknowledgement because it's so important to just put perspective on the peoples of this area that we're still here. So I want to thank my tribal relatives, past, present, and emerging. They're the original Tarahatam, or peoples, of Tobangad. And Tobangad is our world. It's the place that we knew, our territories. Our territory was many, many villages spread out along a big, expansive area. And it's all unceded territory. We never sold it, we never gave it up. So Tobangad today would be called San Fernando Valley, all the way north to past Huntington Beach, like Newport Beach area, and then east along the Santa Ana River to Corona and Riverside, and then back along the foothills. All that was our territory, villages dotted all over the water systems that were flowing. And we also held the 4 southern Channel Islands. So I was asked if we had a name for ourselves before we became Gabrielino. And I answered yes, we called ourselves by our village name. So my village, my ancestral village, is in the Santa Monica Mountains, and it's called Pomicrana. So when I introduced myself, I said, Pomicra Betna Home. I am a person of that village. But all we know is those villages that they documented when they found us and when they took us into the mission system. We had family lineages. We know that we married villages out because we didn't want to marry our own relatives. So we actually do have ancestral ties to many different villages. And in my lineage, I also have ancestral ties to Yang'a, which is in Los Angeles, which was a huge, huge cultural center where people would come from miles around, many villages out, even from the Colorado River, to trade. So I want to, before I go in too much into my family history, I just want to acknowledge the ancestors, for their teachings of helping us to live in reciprocity with the lands, the waters, the minerals, the plants, the animals. Those were all our relatives. We never ever separated ourselves from it. And as a matter of fact, in Tongva, we don't have a word for nature because we're not separate from it. We are part of it. So, we remember the ancestors. We thank our elders and our teachers. We stand with our children and the 7 generations to come. And with that, I'm going to invite my husband to come up here, and we're going to sing an ancestor song. But again, this ancestor song, it's not human-centric when we say ancestors, because we are related to the all. So this would talk about all life that has been here and all life that has left this realm. And it also acknowledges the four directions, so that would be all of your ancestors as well. Oh, here's my husband, Joe. I hope that felt good. Yeah, so the Aumet just says good evening, Anuk Baton to the ancestors, and then the four directions is what we were singing. And we sing it 4 times through because there's the 4 directions that we're acknowledging. So I'm going to share a little bit of our history. Some of you all, how many of you heard of the Tonga people or know a little bit about them? Not too much over here, but all right, that's good.
4th grade.
4th grade? Well, I bet you didn't hear these stories. Yeah, because like building a mission system, it doesn't teach us anything if it doesn't follow with the truth, right? So I'm going to tell you about my family. I mentioned that the village that we come from, and when the San Gabriel mission was being built, it was built by my people. And they were taken from the villages closest to San Gabriel. They were forced to stay there. They could not leave. They separated the families. They put the women and the girls in one dorm and the men and the boys in another because they wanted to make sure we don't keep procreating, and that's how you break the system, right? And people were dying. People were dying because we didn't have resistance to the illnesses that they brought here, the diseases. But beyond that, they were also being overworked, underfed. They weren't allowed to eat the traditional foods that they were used to that kept their strength up. And they definitely weren't giving them enough for what they were doing, the hard labor. So people were dying in huge quantities. So what they would do is they would then branch out and go to other villages further out in Pullman. So by the time they got to my ancestral village, and you think like Santa Monica Mountain sounds far from San Diego, but it really isn't that far because you could oversee Bayona wetlands from my village. Comigrana, Comi means east, so it was the most east-facing village in that mountain range. And so when they got to our village, they already had enough adults. They didn't need adults. But they wanted to break the system. They wanted to tear our lineages and our villages apart. So they took the children. So in my family line, my six-time great-grandpa was taken at 7 years old. He never saw his parents again. But the Catholic priests were very good at keeping records. So that's why we know so much about our family. We were able to trace it back to this child that was taken from his ancestral village, and he was baptized the very next day, which was customary. And they gave him a name, and he became Prospero Dominguez. So now he has a Spanish name, and he will be speaking Spanish for the rest of his life. He will never see his parents again. And we know that they did not get baptized. They were left alone, and it was only Prospero. So Prospero was brought up in the mission system, and he is taught to be a vaquero. He's a cowboy, basically. And once the mission system crumbled, they were supposed to return the land to the people, to their original peoples. But that didn't happen because then this became Mexico, and the Spanish people took over the lands, and they created the ranchos. They had ranches out everywhere. And so my people then had to go work for the ranchers in order to make a living. And in some cases, hard labor, but at least you were getting paid for your work, right? But in other cases, like at Yangon, Los Angeles, it's noted that they didn't always pay their people fairly. What they would do sometimes is on Friday, when you were supposed to get paid, they would pay them with liquor. So the people would drink the liquor, they would get drunk, they would be arrested, they would spend their weekend in jail. And then Monday, those same ranchers would come and bail people out and use them again for another week of work. So why would they do this? Because it was cheaper, right? Give them a little bit of alcohol. It's a lot cheaper than paying decent wages. So those are things that happened in our ancestral territory. Now my family, they, like a lot of people, kind of went underground because you couldn't really get work if you were Indian or not fair work. So you could blend in and you can look like a lot of the people who had been mixed with the Spanish that were brought from Mexico. And you could say you're Mexican and you could actually get some decent wages. So my family came up over where Magic Mountain is? That's Tavian territory traditionally. There's a village there that belongs to Tavian. But right behind there's Highway 126. And there was a lot of ranches all the way down that highway to Peru. And so there's a place called Rancho Camulos. It's still there today, but instead of an active ranch, it's a museum. And my family was working for that family, for the Del Valle family. My great-grandma, her job was to take care of the chapel. And they taught her how to make little doilies and keep the chapel clean. And it was a stopping point. This is horse and buggy days, right? So when people were coming from Los Angeles and they wanted to go to like Santa Barbara, you couldn't do it in one day. So there would be a stopping point. They would stay there at the rancho. And that's why they needed that chapel and some accommodations. But Mrs. Del Valle, she really liked my great-great-grandma very, very much. So when my great-grandma was born, she became her sponsor when she was baptized. And so being her godmother, she actually paid for her to a finishing school. And she got an education and was a teacher. So when she became a teacher, she decided to go to Arizona because there was not enough work here. And that's where she met her husband, and he was a laborer. Eventually, there wouldn't be enough work even in Arizona, so they came back home. And so my family always was here, you know, either from San Gabriel area, then over here to Santa Clarita area, and then finally my grandpa settled in San Fernando Valley. My grandpa was the hardest working man I've ever seen. He never, ever passed up a job. He worked at least, if not 7 days a week, at least 6 days a week. And when I met my husband, that was the information he said. He says, you're in the same, he's in construction, so he says, you're in the same business I'm in. And so I'm going to tell you, never say no to a job. You take everything that comes your way and you save it, because there will be times where it's raining and you won't be able to work. And that's how you're going to take care of your family. So that's a little bit about my personal story. Let's see. If we went back, way back, like to really before any foreigners came to our shores, our stories tell us a lot of things about our creation, you know? And it's not only, like I said, about humans. Our creation stories take it way, way back, because the humans were the last to enter this realm. So our stories tell us, if we go way, way back to the original instructions that we were given from Creator, there was very little life in the beginning. There was lava flowing, mountains were growing, the water could flow unrestricted, and life started to form in the form of microbes, and then little critters into the soil, and then other kinds of animals. And for millennia, you know, the animals would change. There was huge giants that we all have read about, right, that are no longer here. And so life changed, and it changed, and it changed. But when it came time for the humans to come into this realm, Creator told the animals and the plant people, these people that I'm going to be bringing into this realm are going to need a lot of help to survive. And he asked if they would be willing to do that for us. And the plants said, yes, we can be their clothing, we can be their food and their medicine, even their shelter. And the animals, they said, yes, some of us, we can help. So some of them changed. Some went up into the heavens, some went into the waters below, some went all around. And that's why we have these animals that are like spirit helpers, because those are the animals that decided that they would be our helpers. And one of them is the deer. The deer was food for us. The deer was clothing for us. Provided so much. And for that reason, we didn't take taking a life lightly. So we would have to pray and dance and ask Creator to bring that animal into our environment so that we could go ahead and have food for the time, right? And so after 4 days, when we would go out to hunt, we never took the first one that we saw. We waited till that deer came into our area and gave us the okay, I am here for you. And for that reason, we never wasted any bit of it. Not a single bit of that animal. Everything was used. The antlers could be used when we're cooking and we would want to stew something up so that we don't burn ourselves. The sinew that we used for sewing was the tendons. The little deer toes, those would become rattles. And those were very special rattles because those were used since that animal gave its life. It was used when we had our morning ceremonies, 4 days of singing, so that our people could cross over into spirit realm. Those were the rattles that we used. So, you know, we had just this deep connection to a lot of the animals that we felt were our helpers. And another one that represents the east, because the deer represents the east, is also the hawk. And so we asked, like, what do those animals teach us? Because humans learn our behaviors through the animals. We follow them. So we knew, how to find our food sources. We watched them to know what was safe to eat. So these animals were our teachers. And the hawk and the deer, they teach us about reciprocity. They teach us about giving before you take. And that's one of our huge lessons that we teach our children. To never, ever take before giving. To never take before asking permission. And even once permission is given, you never take more than you need. If you're going to pull from a plant because you need medicine or food, you ask that plant. You let the plant know why you're taking it, what it needs to help you with. And you never take too much from any one plant or any one area. So going like to the south, the animals that represent that area is the owl and the snake. And a lot of people are afraid of both of those animals. The owl in native culture represents a messenger bird, but it's the messenger of death. So a lot of people are very scared of them. But if you think about it, if that messenger is coming to let you know that it's going to be your time, it gives you time to prepare, to get your affairs in order, right? And the snake is the complete opposite. It's a symbol of healing. And for us, thinking about that animal that always has its belly upon Mother Earth, the closest person to our Earth Mother is that snake. So very, very highly regarded for us, I should have probably started in the north. The north is where we say life begins because that's where the waters and the snow start. And the animals that are represented there is the bear and the eagle. And both of those teach us how to take care of our young, right? It's something that we have forgotten. To think that we put our young in cages because they're coming into a territory that we have claimed is wrong.
Yes. Yes.
We are supposed to take care of our babies. We're supposed to, just like the bear, right? Take care of that child, that nothing happened to them. So those are those lessons that I'm talking about. And then the West, we believe that when we leave this realm, our spirit goes to the West. And that's where you enter into spirit realm. And whereas, for us here in California, the West is the ocean moment. The ocean is healing. The ocean is full of life. And the animals that are in that ocean are all very important. But two of the really big ones are the dolphin and the raven. And also, those teachings that they teach us is just amazing. And I want to share one story about the raven, because this is documented, that when the settlers first came on their big ships, and they went to Catalina Island, which we call Bimo, and the people there was two huge ravens that always congregated around the people. And the people had a lot of respect for these ravens. Well, when these foreigners came and we saw them on the ship, we greeted them in our little kiat boats. We came out and greeted them. We brought them in. We gave them shelter and food and, let them rest there. But when they saw that the people really were kind of like adoring these ravens, they thought that was like devil worshiping or something evil. And so one of the soldiers killed the two ravens, shot them dead. And the people screamed and cried, "Why would you do that? Why would you do that?" They were just mortified that you would kill these animals when they weren't doing anything wrong. So I tell this story because that is our first introduction to these people who think differently than we do. These people that don't look at animals as our relatives, that they can think that life can just be taken but for no reason. You're not going to use those feathers. You're not going to eat the meat. You're just going to leave it there to die. And I share this with you because you all are living here now. You're like the new stewards of the land. You are burying your dead here now. This is your territory now as well. And so I always ask people to help us Help us to be good caretakers. We're in a drought, and yet water is just being forced into the ocean. We don't save the rainwater. We don't utilize it. We have all of our water sources that used to run freely into the tributaries into the LA River are now capped, dammed, stopped. So our water tables are almost empty. And our river has been concreted and controlled. So it no longer flows like the free spirit that it once was. It's controlled and forced out. That water is our relative. That water is not a resource, but it keeps us alive. And if we think of that water and the spirit that it has, it should be flowing the way it's supposed to. And they say, oh, but it's dangerous because it floods out and people die. Well, maybe people shouldn't be living upon the river. We didn't do that. We wanted to keep our water pristine. We wanted it to be drinkable. And if you think about that ecosystem that we have taken out by putting concrete, you know, we had salmon. We still had fish. We had life in that river originally. And then the beautiful plants that Creator put there, the tule, the jungus, that was a filter that would keep the waters clean. And then think of all the life that would thrive there, the birds and all the animals that would eat from those beautiful plants. So that's what I'm trying to share with you all is speak up. Let your elected officials know that we're not being good stewards, that we're still causing damage, and that the climate issue is not going to go away with these ways that we're treating the environment. If we don't let those water tables fill back up, there's not going to be enough water for us to survive. But you know what? Mother Earth will survive. She'll purge us. She doesn't need us. We need her. So Earth will survive. Life will continue. We just have to decide as humans, do we want to be part of it? Because I do. And those teachings about leaving it better than you found it, about the 7 generations to come should be able to inherit this paradise that our ancestors inherited. So those are all the kind of things that I'm just trying to get you all to help us to be good stewards, you know. I spend a lot of time going to meetings and talking to elected officials and to state people and federal people and city people, because like when they were talking about revamping the LA River, they were having all these meetings all over the place, and they were asking the residents, what would you like to see in your area? And everybody's going, parks, golf courses, and we're like, no, we don't need more grass. That sucks up the water, the moisture. You know, and if we want parks, can't it be like an open system, you know, that native plants grow, which don't take a lot of water, and let it be the native plants that the animals from this area need to survive? Can't it be more like an open space so that these animals don't have to cross freeways and risk getting killed? You know, so much that we're doing wrong, and I don't know how you change it when you have this infrastructure, but I feel like if the government would pay some of those people who live along the water system to move out further, and we could undam it and let it flow the way it's supposed to, our biota wetlands would again have water and would be thriving. Another system that they're trying to repair, but it's like, can't we let Mother Earth repair herself and just stop trying to control, right? So I'm going to offer another song, and this is Mother Earth's song. All it does is give her thanks for the water, the land, the air, the food. We call it our daily gifts, right? She never stops giving, no matter what we do to her, no matter how much we hurt her. Another lesson, you know, we need to tell our park systems to stop using herbicides and pesticides. So this is our Mother Earth song. I wish one and high, know you go home. Aweshkone hai yoyoko. Orura mare kwate. Pare yoike. Yoyoko. Aweshkone hai. Aweshkone hai. Aweshkone hai yoyoko. Aweshkone hai yoyoko. Orura mare kwate. Pare yoike. Yoyoko. Aweshkone hai. Aweshkone hai. Aweshkone hai yoyoko. Aweshkone hai yoyoko. Orura mare kwate. Pare yoike. Yoyoko. Aweshkone hai. Aweshkone hai. Aweshkone hai yoyoko. Aweshkone hai yoyoko. Orura mare kwate. Pare yoike. Yoyoko. Aweshkone hai. Aweshkone hai. Thank you for that one. I can hear it over here. So this is our percussion instrument, and it is made out of an elderberry branch. Elderberry is a plant that is very, very special to us. The flowers make a really good, healthy tea, and in cold and flu season, it's something that we use. The berries are edible, although we suggest that you cook them because they're a little bit harsh, like tannins, so we cook them. I make like a drink out of it that tastes very much like what they call Jamaica, another plant, right? And you can make jelly and just all kinds of stuff out of the beautiful berries. But we call it a musical plant because we make our clapsticks, our percussion instruments out of it. And we also can make flutes out of it. And you can see like there's a hole in the middle. Arakawe is our word for our clapstick. It basically means a split stick. And inside of the elderberry branch, it's got a very soft material. It's almost like cork. So it's really easy to pull that out, and then we split the stick. All of our instruments were made of natural things. Everything we had was natural, right? We didn't have metal. So we also used rattles. And the rattle that my husband used today, that was introduced to us. That came from the South. Originally, it didn't even come from this continent, but it was brought to the South, and then the South introduced it to us. But we still had rattles. We just had turtle rattles, and we had kelp bulb rattles, and coyote gourd rattles. Skin rattles. And then the one that I mentioned earlier, the deer troll rattles, So we did have those kind of instruments, we just didn't use the board that they use today. Anything else? I'm trying to think of, as a matter of fact, if there's any questions, if there's anything, since I'm here, if you have any curiosities, I'm happy to take your question.
One of the things I remember from childhood was the stories that when an Indian native would kill a deer, they would go over and say, either I apologize or thank you.
Yes, thank you. I didn't say that. I talked about the request and the reciprocity, but he's saying that once you also killed an animal, you give it almost like a last rites, right? You give it a little bit of water and you thank it, because it gave its life to you. Yeah, absolutely.
It was part of the religion?
It's our religion didn't have a name. It's just reciprocity, It's just that being respectful, doing things in the right way as the words that we were given from our Creator. There was almost like you could say the Ten Commandments and then some, you know, because I don't think there's reciprocity in the Ten Commandments, right? But that's important to treat them as their spirits that they are, you know? Yes.
I like to say that Mother Earth was our religion and nature was our church.
Not was, is.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah. From childhood, I loved the nature because my grandma took us to the mountain where it's called Mountain of Flowers. And such a beautiful place it was. And I don't know, I think it's from the childhood that parents have to teach the children to love the nature, animals, and how to plant them and propagate them. And a very nice story about my father. He had a greeny stand in the wall. If it was showered into the ground, it would grow to become a tree.
That's beautiful.
So he planted a plum tree in a planter, and it was not fruiting. So he came to me and said, "Son, I'm going to plant this tree." And I said, let's give a tree 1 year. If it doesn't, let's go ahead and do it anyway. So I forgot about it, and a year later he calls me and says, "Son, I'm going to show you something. Come here." And I go to that tree planter. He had very beautiful one plant. One, just one. He says, "Listen, this tree was listening. What we were talking about. He was plant here. Heaven."
Perfect, right? And that tree stood, and I bet it gave much more later too.
That shows that who knows, maybe plants listen.
Yes.
Yeah, and then
Yes. I think they do. That's why we let the plants know what kind of medicine we need. Many plants, they have multiple uses, right? They might be able to heal many different things. So we let the plant know, I need you for this, and it helps you to heal. So, yeah. And don't we feel very comfortable in nature? It's like very grounding. A lot of people like to go camping and like kind of unplug from the crazy city life. But when you're around trees, yeah, you just feel very peaceful.
sometimes I put my hand on the tree. I think they feel when I say thank you for the good food that you give me. And they give more.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I sing to the plants, and that's another teaching that we say is that, and actually it's not just a teaching because science proves a lot of these things that we always believed, but like percussion instruments, they say they have proven through science that the roots of the trees actually respond to that percussion, and every people have some kind of percussion instrument. So, when you are always singing to the earth, you'll see the mycelium and everything's just like dancing. It feels the vibration, and so that's why we say it has spirit too.
And it's the beat that derives the music.
Yeah.
Every music has its own beat.
Yeah,
And that's how the percussion.
that's wonderful. Thank you. But I do want to say one thing, because I talked about the mission system, and I didn't say too much, but we couldn't speak our tongue, our native tongue. We couldn't dress the way we dress. We couldn't eat the foods we eat. All of that stuff, right? But yet today I was able to introduce myself, and I'm able to sing my songs. And so I do want to give credit to those scholars that saw that our languages were dying in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And for us, primarily, there's been several, but primarily it was J.P. Harrington and C. Hart Merriam that reported those words, spoke to people and said, how do you say this? How do you say that? And they reported these words because they saw that it was at danger of being lost. And if you ever, there's a movie, it's a documentary about, sorry, I'm mixing them up. Not Miriam. Harrington. There's a documentary about him. It's very interesting because he didn't only come to the Tonga. He went from tribe to tribe to tribe to tribe. And so all of those documents of recordings were at the Smithsonian. And we now have access to them. So for over 20 years, people have been studying these languages and reviving them. And I am on the Language Revitalization Committee. And I'm so excited about it. You know, not only Tongva, but I'm also learning my Smuich dialect of Chumash. And so since I'm a singer and songwriter, that's what I'm not only just speaking it and teaching it, but also making songs so that we can speak in the language that we believe these plants that have been here forever too want to hear. They remember. They have a DNA like we do. And they remember this language and these songs. Even though the songs are different because they're new, right? They're new ones that we're composing. But it's that language.
How many speakers are there of your language?
We have none that we could say are 100% fluent, but we have, I would say at least a good 30 people that have enough of the command of the language that we can talk to one another. And for my Chumash family, we actually do little retreats. And we go and that's all we do is language, and speak to each other. We try to do like full immersion and not speak English. And it's hard sometimes because we don't have all the words here, you know, but we try to push ourselves. Like we have a dictionary, but we're not going to touch it. We're going to try to remember and maybe describe something if we can't remember the word. So I think maybe in, 10 years or so, if we could have fluent speakers.
So are more people joining?
Yes, there's a lot of people learning. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask, for our young people, our children and our youth who have been raised, enculturated by the dominant culture, that who have unknown levels of native bloodline isn't actually experienced as important as they know that they have relatives, but they don't know the stories. And so, and if they were raised in different faiths, as happens, do you have any suggestions of stories, sacred stories, that, for example, from this community? What are the reliable places to find those stories? And since this is being broadcast, maybe what other ways could people find their stories?
Well, yeah, because a lot was not documented, right? So there's different sources that did document. First, there's anthropologists that, from women, like Kroger. He was like the expert of all California tribes. He wrote a lot about it, firsthand of seeing things. But there was also, going back way further than that, it's the diaries of the people that came here to these lands. We get a lot of information, like for instance, cultural burnings. That was prevalent. That's something that we did, and we knew that it helped Mother Earth, that it helped. There's certain seeds that need that fire to open. We knew that every year they would burn the house that they lived in, which we call a quiche, and it's made out of willow poles and tule covering, and we would burn it every year. That would keep the organisms at bay, that could get you sick. And that's why we didn't have so many illnesses here. There was like a lot of things that we did, and how do we know that we did that? The first thing the people that came in these large ships said was, oh, we don't want to land in San Pedro. Well, they called it the Bay of Smokes, because they came at the time that we were doing burns. So we know that we did these things, and then we lost that way of doing it. But those are the things that we're trying to revive again. We know that our earth needs these things. And the fire department is doing controlled burns. But there's that word control again. They're taking away the whole spiritual aspect of it, the prayer aspect of it, and doing what the plants and the soil needs, not just what we need, because we don't want these houses to burn down. So if we start taking out some of the invasive plants that are causing there's so much overgrowth, and they're causing that fire to run rapidly. So we need to go back to doing cultural burns, where we do it with ceremony and prayer, and we get things back to where it's supposed to be. That's all part of helping the climate, you know. But back to your question about the stories, so there are books, but I think the best way is some of our, like myself and many others that are storytellers, and that we're sharing these with the public. There are a lot of our stories we've done that are now on YouTube. Personally, I don't record myself, but I've done a lot for organizations, and they record it and they upload it. Recently I did for the LAUSD, the Big Read program, did a little collaboration with an artist, and she did shadow art to my story, and I gave a story of a traditional Tonga story. So now all these youth are able to hear this story. Did another one with, I can't remember the name of the group, sorry, but another one that was shown for Pasadena Unified School District. Different story. So a lot of our stories are out there. I think it's more fun to hear it, you know, than just reading it, because we put that spin and we give them more information than just what was documented.
That's helpful.
Okay, one more question?
Yeah, you haven't mentioned petroglyphs before, but I know I've seen some around here, and they seem to feature condors quite a lot. And I just wondered if there's any significance, particularly apart from the fact that there's incredible big birds, to condors that you know about.
You know, there's many large birds, basically, you know, like the condor, the eagle, the hawk. Those were all very, very important birds to us. So yes, there are. Many of we know that we had pictographs, but many of them have been destroyed in Tonga territory. There's still quite a few in Chumash territory. But yes, some of them do tell a story, and like you'll see what's prevalent in Chumash territory sometimes is like the, what do you call it, the fish, the swordfish, thank you. And why is that an important fish, for instance, you know? And then we find out that because it's documented that the swordfish would sometimes hit the whale, and the whale would beach itself, and that would provide food for the people. And it's too much for just one village. So they would send runners out to say, there's a whale over here, come and get some, and they would share with everybody. So the swordfish was very important, and in the Chumash territory, there's not only pictographs, but there's actually a place where they had a shrine where we would give beads made out of shells, which was our money. And we would do prayers so that the swordfish could help to bring a whale up. So all of those animals that I was talking about, they all teach us something, or they give us something, or they guide us. So we do look at them in that way. And the little hummingbird is a warrior. You know, if you ever go into the space, they'll stand there and they'll come up to you, right? They're not going to back down. It's a warrior bird. But it's also another medicine bird.
How do you connect what you know and what you do with this Poor People's Campaign with people like us? What's the connection? How do we get
Well, I'm not connected to the Poor People's Campaign. I have been invited on now a couple of times just to speak. But I do support what the Poor People's Campaign stands for. And when I close, and you let me know when it's time, I'm going to share a poem that I wrote, because my poem talks a lot about what the Poor People's Campaign is doing. It wasn't written for that. It's the way we see things. But we need to stand up and do what's right. We need to speak up for those who don't have a voice. You know, and so I do support it. I have lots of other jobs that I don't really follow the Poor People's Campaign too much. Yes.
I think we're going to piggyback on the beautiful lady over here, and I know that my daughter Lana would love to hear you and your community tell these stories. They're extremely important. How arrogant that I remember being born and moving
immersed in all cultures. But my question is, how can we organize small meetings for children, whether it's at schools or people you know, or how can I help? Because I would be highly interested in whether that's a fire circle or a cow ceremony, or these are things that I attend and I've been learning about for about 40 years. So it's very sacred, and it's a lot of prayer and meditation, but I definitely want to involve the youngsters, and I want, parents and children alike to know and just to fall in love with these stories. I think it's very, very important. And then the other thing I wanted to say or ask is, how open are these Congress people, officials, when you go to speak to them? I can imagine, it takes a lot of courage and just being valiant to go and speak to people that they're really listening.
Are the officials, she's asking if for those of you who can't hear it, are the officials listening when we ask them, about doing things that are better for the environment? Yes and no. We have a lot of change coming, a lot of progressive thinkers that are coming up. But yeah, it's going to take a long time. If it's not their idea, it probably one's not going to happen. But we can plant the seed, and then they'll think it's their idea in a couple of years. So I'm okay with that. We don't have ego. It doesn't matter who gets credited. It matters what gets done. But the other part that you mentioned about like the youth, that's another thing that a lot of us are working really hard to get LAUSD and Pasadena unified as well, and Linwood unified, to incorporate our stories and our teachings. Forget the mission project. If you're not going to teach the truth, that's useless. But you should be teaching from the little ages, not just 4th grade, the little ages. Teach them how to value our Mother Earth. Teach them how to value themselves.
Yes.
And there's little projects, I always tell people, there's little projects they could do with plants at that age. And then as each grade, they can take on a little bit more and a little bit more. But we need to teach reciprocity again. We need to teach respect and honor. We need to teach love. But that respect part is why there's so much violence today. We're missing that.
Yes.
And so we do need to teach it. We can't just rely on that they're going to get it from home, because we have a lot of colonized, broken homes, and they didn't get that love, so they don't know how to give that love.
Well, we're still having those issues. My daughter just went through an issue, and I had to talk to the vice principal, and I said, I understand the school's perspective is not of prejudice and racism, and it's a long list, but if I understand that's not the school's perspective, but we have to do something. If the parents won't educate their children, then I will. And it may not be pretty. But no, I guess the question is, if it's not incorporated in schools, I am willing to help, or how do we organize just small gatherings where parents, children are invited, whether that's on Facebook, we propagate, so we just get the word out, and I think it's extremely important that our children and other elders and parents know about these stories.
Well, a lot of times we are invited by communities to come in and speak, just the way I'm here, and if you would want to coordinate something, feel free to reach out. But then the first question you had asked about like ceremony, that is more private. We don't call people in, because there is, people take what we're trying to teach and then they change it and they start selling it. And our ceremonies, just like our medicines, are not for sale. So we're very guarded with our ceremonies. We don't put anything on social media as far as ceremonies.
Oh, no, I just wanted to story.
Yeah, storytelling, absolutely.
Okay, that is.
Okay, so I think I'm probably at an hour. Do you have one more question?
Yes, this is a question. Since you sing the traditional song, I was wondering if there are professional musicians who go to the tribes and record the songs, because I'm sure some of it is lost because it was not recorded.
You are correct. Our songs for the Tongva, for Chumash, we have audio recordings, but the Tongva does not have audio recordings of our songs. We have the words written down, and we've had to retire those songs because we don't know enough about them, how they were sung, when they were sung. the true meaning of them. And that's why we're making new songs. But no, we're not gonna have some outsider record it, because then it becomes their property. So we'll control that as how we teach it and who we teach it to. Yes, one more question.
I just want to thank you. These cities, when I go up now from now, I will love the birds. I don't know why. Like, I have a respect for the love for the trees. Maybe that's what I was missing. I walk the street, I go crazy. Maybe that's what I'm
Thank you. I'm going to conclude with the poem that I told you about. And I really want you all to just think about this and think how can you help in any aspect of this. And it's called Imagine a World. Imagine a world where the water is pristine and all that dwells there is thriving. Imagine a world where the air is so clean you can see the mountains and islands across the ocean. Imagine a world where every person in your community is valued, where skills are taught, food is shared, everyone has enough, so there's no need for greed, and we have councils of elders to solve disputes. Imagine a world where there's no need for prisons because we are all honest, giving, and kind, and we're all doing our part to live in honor. Imagine a world where respect, inclusivity, and reciprocity is a natural way of being. Is this just my dream, or can you too imagine this world? Thank you again for having me. I wish.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenna Kyle and I actually convene the Sacred Text Study Working Group, and so I just want to say thank you so much for tonight's discussion. I'm actually Chickasaw and African American freedmen, and so this is so great for me to be able to marry these two ideas of sacred text, sacred stories, and also ecological justice. So thank you guys so much for coming. This is on Facebook, so please share with your communities. Thank you so much. And thank you again so much. And thank you, Joe. That was beautiful music.
Yeah.